This is a lesson on rounding. Another word for rounding would be estimating. So you see here, rounding to the nearest. Most often you're going to see round to the nearest 10, 100, 1,000. It'll be multiples of 10. You could be round to the nearest million. A definition of rounding is to give an estimate that ends in zeros. So we round to make things easier when we're considering numbers. When would you use rounding? You might use it when you go to the GA book fair. If somebody in your family said you have $20 and you can go to the book fair and pick out books that add to that. You might go around the book fair and find books for $5.99 or $2.95 or $3.75, and in that case it would be good to round. Another place people do a lot of rounding is when they go grocery shopping. So they have an idea of how much they're spending by the time they get to the cash register. So we've made up steps for rounding here that would help you remember how to do it. The steps for rounding go something like this. Let's make sure we can see them all on the same page. The number one step for rounding is underline the place. So when you see a problem, it will normally say round to the 10, round to the 100, and in that case, you underline the place of the digit. So if we're looking at rounding 283 to the nearest 10, I would underline the digit in the tens place. This is number one. The second thing you would do is build a house around that digit. So here's my house around the 8. The third thing I do is to look at my neighbor. All the magic, all the changing that's going to be happening is happening in that house. And the one that kind of directs what's going on is the neighbor. So here in step 3, I look at the neighbor to the right, which is a 3. I then say the rhyme, number 4, the rhyme we've learned in class, which is, if the neighbor is 5 or above, you give the digit in the house a shove. If it's 4 or below, you leave the digit in the house alone. So in this case, I have an 8 that's in the house. It's in the tens place. I'm looking at my neighbor, which is a 3. A 3 would be characterized as being 4 or below, so I'm not going to bump the number in the house. It will stay the same. The only choice is that the number in the house will either get bumped one digit higher, in this case to a 9, or it will stay the same. But because of the 3 being 4 or below, that 8 stays the same. The sixth step is the numbers after the house to the right of the house are all zeros because we are rounding, and everything to the left of the house stays the same in most cases, unless it's a 9. So in this case, 283 rounded to 280. Let's look at that with a 2-digit number. Let's say a 75. We'll go through those steps once again. So let's say I said round to the nearest 10. I underline the digit, which is in the tens place. In this case, it's a 7. Number 2, I build the house around the 7. Number 3, I look at the neighbor, which is a 5. Number 4, I say the rhyme. 5 or above, give it a shove. 4 or below, leave it alone. So it is a 5. My neighbor is telling me, the 5 is telling me that I need to bump, which is our 5th step, I need to bump that 7. I bump him only 1, he bumps to an 8. The 6th step is numbers after the house turn to a 0. And our 7th step is everything to the left stays the same. In this case, we don't have anything to the left. So 75 rounded to the nearest 10 would be an 80. So let's look at another couple of examples here. I'm rounding to the nearest 10, 149. I underline the digit in the tens place. I build the house. I look at my neighbor. I say the rhyme. 5 or above, give it a shove. In this case, it's a 9. Again, all the magic happens in the house. So the 9, because it's 5 or above, is telling the number in the house to get bumped by 1. The 4 becomes a 5. Everything to the right turns to a 0 because we are rounding. And to the left, it stays the same. So 149 rounded to the nearest 10 equals 150. My next example is 1,345 rounded to the nearest hundreds. So I underline the digit. I build the house. I look at my neighbor. I say the rhyme. 5 or above, give it a shove. 4 or below, leave it alone. So it is in this case a 4, the neighbor. So it's telling the number 3, the digit in the house where the magic is happening, to leave it alone means stay the same. Everything to the right of the house turns to a 0. To the left of the house stays the same. So 1,345 rounded to the nearest 100 would be 1,300. So let's look at a couple examples here. Round off the number in the orange rectangle and circle the correct answer in the white. And you click on the yellow circle to check. So we're rounding here. You can see our choices are all in the tens, all to the tens. So we're rounding. 37 needs to be rounded to the nearest 10, which means on a number line, we had 10, 20, 30, 40. 37 would be about there. We can see on this number line, if I were rounding 37, it is closer to 40 than it is to 30. But if we go back to the way we've worked it out, I underline the digit, I build the house, I look at the neighbor, which is a 7, I give the 3 a shove, and in this case, I would say 40 is my answer. The next one, you do the same thing, build the house, look at the neighbor. I would say 50 is my answer. You can go ahead, pause the video, figure out the rest of the problems, and then when you're done, you're going to hit play again, and I'll show you the answers. So, in this case, 40 is the answer here. 52 rounded is a 50. 16 rounded is a 20. 41 rounded is a 40. 24 rounded is 20. 33 rounded is a 30. 48 rounded is closest to 50. So let's look at one more set of examples, which are in the hundreds. This time we're rounding off again to the digit in the tens place. Our focus is on that digit. So in this case, we would, let me pick a different color. We would build our house around the 3. We look at our neighbor. In the case of this, we would bump the 3 to a 4. So I would choose 240 as my answer. The next case, I look at the 5. I build the house. I look at my neighbor. And I leave it alone because 4 or below, I have a 2 there. So I would say it is 150. Again, pause for a minute. Pause the video. take a minute to write on a separate piece of paper what your guesses would be, what your choices would be for the remaining numbers, and then hit play again to check your answers. So if we're checking, it's 240, 150, 216 rounded is 220, 417 is 420, 324 is 320, 133 is 130, and our final one, 148, is rounded to the nearest 10, is 150. I hope that helps you with rounding. This is the end. Good luck and goodbye.